G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Gavin Hodgins from FP Group based in Melbourne. Thanks for your time today, Gavin.
No problems, Troy. Thanks for having me.
Let's tell the audience how we know each other. Kate Toon suggested you might be great to have on the cast and put us in touch.
Yeah, she did. Yes, I've known Kate for some time and done her course and part of her digital group and things. So it was a nice surprise that she recommended me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
I interviewed Kate recently, and her cast will be live, I'd say a week or so before this one goes live. So tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Okay, so I'm the CEO of FP Group, which is FloatPac. Business started in 1982. Basically, at a high level, is a plastics business. It started manufacturing inflatable, what's called an inflatable lift bag for the Australian Defence Force back in 1982. And I've only just actually recently found out that the original owners of the company at that stage were sort of pioneers in the type of welding that has become quite widely used around the world, called high-frequency welding. Mm-hmm. So we started high-frequency welding lift bags, got into other aspects of flexible materials with what we call pillow tanks and onion tanks and bladders for boats and big water storage bladders and all different types of stuff. I got involved in the business in 2002, I think, 2002, 2003, and sort of came in to look after its plastics division predominantly. By that stage, it had developed a product called FishPac. FishPac is a live fish transport system on aircraft, which is a lot of seafood that gets transported around the world. What makes our product different is we transport that seafood using oxygen, so we actually transport the fish alive. Yeah. Because oxygen's rated a dangerous good, we had to go through a whole heap of approvals processes and things in the late 90s, and are currently the only company in the world with the approved equipment to be able to transport live fish with oxygen as dangerous goods. So it's sort of the Mercedes Benz BMW of seafood transport, but when you've got very high-end seafood, coral trout out of Australia and lobster and all those types of things that cost you a lot of money if they perish during transport, it's a system that makes transport and movement of fish more environmentally friendly. More fish arrive alive, which makes the customers more money. And so the business had really been focused on that. I got involved in the plastics division side. Actually started as a welder on the factory floor, moved my way up, and then I've been running the company now as a CEO. And then more recently, we've gotten involved in floating solar. So floating solar started as a concept mainly in Asia in 2015. The idea of floating solar panels over water rather than using land or putting them on your roofs became an idea that countries, particularly that are land poor, which obviously is in Australia, but parts of Asia and other parts of the world, started running with floating solar. And so we now have a business that's actually now separate from FloatPac called Floating Solar Proprietary Limited. Mm-hmm. And that's aiming to become the first locally made, Australian designed floating solar system that we're bringing to market at the moment.
Because solar's huge in renewables. I think we're well ahead of a lot of targets. Solar's performed much better in recent years.
Yeah, so there is a problem with solar in Australia in that the East Coast is heavily saturated with solar that's connected to the grid. Yep. And so you start to see these situations in the middle of the day where you've actually got to pay to get rid of your energy, which makes absolutely no sense for anyone who's going to be going and building solar farms and wanting to make some sort of return on that investment. So our business is heavily focused on what we can do in what you call behind the meter. So we're not going to be connected to the grid. We've got clients who have got bodies of water that they can put solar over, and they're going to directly consume that and not have to go through their meter. Yep. There's a very, very big market in that space, we think. And then floating solar has some inherent benefits around saving of water and water security with algal blooming, and really has a really strong affliction to pumped hydro, which is quickly becoming the best way of doing, the cheapest way of storing power anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And so it's got an affliction there that there's not many other types of renewables that can offer that to water. So we see that as a very big growth, big growth potential in the future.
And back on FishPac, I mean, I'm based here in Hobart, Tasmania. And there's a very big salmon industry and just seafood in general, which a lot of, gets flown over, particularly to the Asian market. So, and I've read some years ago that the Tasmanian salmon industry was growing at about $1 million a week in value. At that point, it was a $500 million industry. And I think in the next few years, that'll tip over $1 billion industry annual sales.
Yes, it will. Yeah. So we have an affliction with the salmon industry through our plastics business, in that we make some bespoke water transport liners for them and things like that. So one of the Tasmanian salmon farmers is our biggest client. Mm-hmm. So salmon doesn't lend itself to live transport because it's a pelagic animal, which means that it basically never stops moving.
Yep.
And so salmon transport live is not really done. The way that salmon will be transported is either chilled or frozen. Or canned, depending on what needs to be done, or packaged. Mm-hmm. Our main focus in FishPac in Australia is the coral trout industry out of North Queensland. So we have an amazing coral trout industry that operates out of North Queensland, where every fish is actually line caught, so there's no trawling. Caught off the Great Barrier Reef, sent to Hong Kong, and then up into China. And Australia, pound for pound, has the best coral trout in the world. Yep. And it's a real delicacy, particularly in Chinese culture. Yes. So that's our main focus. But when you talk about other types of seafood, we do some work with lobster, a lot of work with abalone, and then other types of fin fish and mollusks and shellfish and all that sort of thing. It really depends on obviously what a customer wants to do. But it really is a very environmentally friendly way of shipping. Yep. All our packaging is either recyclable or is totally reusable, so there's no landfill. It's as I said in the intro, it's the only type of transport in the world that uses oxygen, which is basically the creme de la creme of how you're going to transport any type of live animal. So
and I see here you also do Flexitank and RainPac as well.
Yeah, so the Flexitank RainPac business is the sort of the plastics fabrication side that I mentioned with regards to the lift bags. So the Flexitank business still does lift bags. We still make the defence bags now, almost 40 years later from when we first started doing them. Does a lot of work in flexible liners and big pillow tanks and all those types of things. The RainPac business is our underhouse rainwater bladder tank system that we developed back when the drought was very bad here in Australia in mid-2005, early 2006. That is a product we've probably sold and had installed about 50 or 60,000 rainwater bladders around the country since we introduced that. So it's a product now that is a well-established. Bladders now are a very well-established way of storing rainwater if you've got space under your house or under your decking without having to take up space in your backyard using a plastic tank. Again, very environmentally friendly, because whereas a rigid tank you have to transport the tank that's been made, all of our products fold down to about 1/10 of their original size, so we can transport a lot more capacity in a much smaller amount of space. And so what that means is that FloatPac and the brands we have under FloatPac and Floating Solar, whilst it's in the plastic space at a higher level, we tend to think now more of the business in the environmental space. I mean, obviously in the Floating Solar area, it's a very linear line as to what we're achieving there, because we're moving into renewables. But when you look at what FloatPac's product range is able to replace, and what that means from a carbon footprint and transport and all those sorts of things, it's becoming a key focus, because obviously the world is becoming very interested in net zero emissions and carbon emissions and all those sorts of things. So it's absolutely a focus of what we're looking at these days as well.
Yeah, I think the bladder under the house, I'm just looking at a photo of it now, what a genius idea, great use of space. And
well, yeah, I mean, back when the drought was really bad, you couldn't get a rainwater tank for love nor money, because a rotomolded tank takes a certain amount of time. The only way you're going to increase capacity is build more tools, which are expensive, get more machines, which are expensive and take time, and you couldn't get them. I mean, there were factories that I was seeing in Melbourne they'd have 2,000 tanks come in and they'd be gone the next day. It was just unbelievable. Whereas a flexible tank, you are using unused space. I mean, obviously, you've got a certain percentage of the market where houses have been built on foundations rather than a concrete slab. Yep. A lot of houses have decks and swimming pools and areas you wouldn't usually think about. But then also where you get into situations where you don't have a lot of backyard space, you don't want to be using that with a water tank. And so we saw a market that was developing there, and Nilex not Nilex, which were around in those days, had released a bladder, and initially the feedback had been really good, but then they ran into supply issues as well, and we sat back and really we probably in hindsight spent too much time, but touch wood, we've never had a problem with it. So it's never been, we sat down and looked at that design and looked at a few other designs and thought, well, the way flexible bladders work, we have a very good understanding of that. Let's look at how we understand that and try and design a different plumbing setup, in that we could see some issues with these competitors in how they were plumbing their tanks to connect to rigid pipework. So myself and our engineer designed a system where the fitting actually came in up underneath the bladder.
Oh, yeah.
And every man and his dog was telling us for a long time that it would never work, and you're going to have problems with this and you're going to have problems with that. And hand on heart, we've had one redesign in now what is probably 13 years.
Right. That
was basically to try and reduce our costs to be able to open up more market. And yeah, it's just one of those things that's gone really well. We've done a fair bit of exporting of that product as well, in Pacific Islands and Guam and all different types of places where water storage is really a huge requirement. And so, yeah, I mean, inherently, what we're seeing now 13 years down the track is our tanks are actually lasting longer than a rigid tank.
Yeah.
And that's got nothing to do with how a rigid tank's made, but generally those rigid tanks are out in the sun.
Of course.
So they're exposed to UV, whereas when you think about it, putting any type of tank, but particularly a bladder tank, under a house, it's got no UV. It's fairly stable with temperature, so you don't get huge variances in how the plastic wants to behave. And so, yeah, it's just become one of those things that we keep selling them. It's obviously very market driven as to when there's droughts and water restrictions and things like that. But as the general public become more educated in what they use water for and how much water costs and water scarcity and all those types of things, it is one of those things that. These days now, the RainPac stuff we continue to market and all that sort of thing, but it is one of those sort of success stories over the years that really sells itself these days. So,
and more recently, you've gone into Australian-made reusable face masks thanks to COVID.
Yeah, so we did have a fairly significant problem when China shut down. So when the seafood world has 99% of seafood that gets transported goes into China, when they shut their borders, that's going to be a significant problem, which it was a problem for us. And so, sorry, are you still there, Troy?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it sounded like it dropped out. So what happened was a lot of product that Flexitank makes, in particular lift bags, we actually do a lot of sewing, but we're not sewers because we take something and sew it and then we weld it. Got it. We already had all the sewing machines, and I mean, we moved a lot of our production out of Melbourne up to Queensland about 4 years ago now, but we kept all our know-how and kept our people at that stage who were doing our sewing. And so when things were really quiet and you're sort of sitting there and thinking, wow, it's a fairly significant drop in the business that no one really saw coming, we were looking at what was going on in the US and the EU, and the US CDC came out and said, you should be wearing a mask. And it was obvious that there was a shortage of masks being talked about in Australia just from a disposable situation. And then as it got worse, we just saw more people wearing masks. So we have an e-commerce platform. One of my main guys who works for me said, I think I've got a good design here. I said to him, well, you make it. I'll see if we can sell it. And it literally just started as something that we were all working from home because we got locked down. I went over to Peter's place and picked up some masks. Stopped at the sewing store and bought a couple of foam mannequin heads. Went home and took some photos and did a bit of work in Canva and just some basic stuff because I really didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so we put on the site with our mailing list. We broadcast the mailing list, kept everybody up to date. Tried to really come in at a price point that meant that it was available to a lot of people because you could sort of see what was coming, that if it was going to get bad, then there was going to be a recession and people were going to lose their jobs. And so we did that and it went okay. I mean, we sold some masks and it gave my guys something to do. This was all sort of as JobKeeper came on board and all that sort of stuff, which obviously helped solidify business and all that sort of stuff. And then so it went a bit quiet. And then unfortunately, I'm in Melbourne with what's happened, well documented in Victoria. We started to, because we built our site back in February, and with the SEO that we've done, we were ranking number 1, number 2, number 3 on Google for when you search for cotton face mask, reusable face mask, just normal keyword stuff that we do.
Yep.
So we started to see a real uptick in face masks, and it wasn't just in Victoria because New South Wales was still bad and all that sort of thing. And then, I'll never, it was a Friday afternoon, I think it was about the last week of June or whenever it was that our government down here said that you should be wearing a mask. I was sitting at home and started getting phone calls from people saying, your website's down. I thought, well, that's a bit strange. So talked to my IT guys, and they're basically just saying to me, Gavin, you guys are just getting smashed on, your SiteGround servers just can't handle this. It's out of control. And so I said to them, look, you guys just deal with that. I can sort of see what's coming here. We were seeing like 500 or 600 people on our website at once, which was, for a company like FloatPac, I mean, you see 10 or 20. I would never check real-time analytics. It was just one of those things that we never had to get really involved in. So we started looking at it, and then a friend of mine who does our PR for us, a lady called Emma Edwards, I was talking to her that afternoon about something to do with floating solar. And I shared with her what had happened on our website. Yep. And this was like 3:30 in the afternoon. And she said to me, Gavin, there's a few people who are going to be interested in that. I think the media are going to be all over this because masks are going to become a big thing, particularly in Victoria. And so within the hour, she rang me back and said, Channel 9 want to talk to you on Zoom, but you're just going to talk to their media desk. So they're just going to want to ask you some questions, answer the questions. It was quite fun. She rang me. I know Emma well enough. She rang me and said, get out of your hoodie, go and put a business shirt on for the first time in 4 months, and talk to Channel 9. So I spoke to Channel 9, didn't really know what they were going to do with it. You're on the call for 5 minutes, and I say, thanks for your time, have a nice day. So watch Channel 9 News that night, and turns out the main story is about masks, and they put floatpac.com across the bottom of Channel 9, and I'm on there for all of about maybe 7 seconds. Like it was my 7-second claim to fame.
Right. Jeez.
And it just went crazy. Like, I mean, it was just like our website probably crashed another 6 times that night.
Jeez.
And then on the Saturday, I called everybody to work. Well, I called everybody on a Zoom call because we couldn't go to work. And I had a phone call from a mobile number that looked familiar to me. It wasn't a number that I don't like. I don't normally answer numbers I don't know. Yeah. The number looked familiar. It turned out that it was a reporter from Channel 7. He said, we got your press release last night. And I'll never forget it because he said, I've just been at Bunnings I think he was in Footscray or somewhere on the other side of the city. I've just been at Bunnings and we've just seen people punching out each other to try and buy disposable masks. Jeez. Like things you just wouldn't, like I look back at it now and just think it was just crazy. But so he said, look, we'd like to come in and just have a chat to you. Can you meet us at FloatPac? Yeah, okay, no worries at all. So by the time we knew what had happened on Friday night, they interviewed me on Saturday. And they took some video of me scrolling through the FloatPac website, and he did say to me, "We'll make sure that's being used." So Channel 7 run. I think the second story of the night was masks. They had the footage of the people punching up with each other in Bunnings, which was just sort of really out there. Then they had again maybe like a 3-second grab of me putting on one of our masks, but then they put our website straight up on Saturday Night News on Channel 7, which is the second biggest news broadcast in Victoria. And I had my analytics open, my marketing guys were watching it, and we watched the website re-tick and go from 500 to 100,000 people on the site in the blink of in 1 or 2 seconds.
God, and it held up.
And it was.
Had you moved?
It held up okay. Yeah. And this is what's actually remarkable. Within 24 hours, we've gone from it being on our cloud servers in Singapore to a dedicated server in Sydney. At times when you usually do that, when you know no one's on the site, and we're having to do these things when there's 500 or 600 people on the site because we're worried about it crashing. And so, it's sort of the face mask thing sort of went from there. It was a wild,
amazing.
It was a wild sort of 8 weeks, and we did but I mean, what was really good was it was starting to get very bad in Victoria. Obviously, we then got told that we had to wear masks. We had another jump from there. We were able to go out and employ 50 people. Like literally put a call out on our Facebook page and a couple other pages saying, if you know how to sew, come and see us today because we've got to go back to work. And we were able to get 50 people in there sewing. Then we went into lockdown, which threw up another issue in that we sort of sat back and thought, wow, if someone came in here with COVID, we'd be in real trouble.
Yep.
And we don't want people to get sick, but B, we obviously have a business to run as well. So we ended up basically decentralising the mask manufacturing. So it went from everything being in our factory to sending sewing machinists home and having them sew at home, have everything cut, move everything around with couriers. A couple of my guys became drivers, and we just sort of ran with the punches from there. So the face mask thing was a really interesting experience, and even now we sort of, obviously it's become a very, particularly overseas, face masks have become a very political subject.
Yeah.
And so we do still deal with the sort of political side of people commenting on things and not being happy about it. But hey, at the end of the day, there's a service requirement here in Victoria. We still have to wear masks down here. I don't think that's going to go anywhere for some time, because they're now saying one of the reasons why we've been able to achieve the amazing numbers we've achieved is because everyone is wearing a mask.
Yeah. Well, that's an amazing growth story in itself, just the mask side of your business. Wow.
Oh, yeah. I think once this is all back to normal, and God, I mean, everyone talks about normal. I mean, God knows how long normal is going to take now. But I think we'll all sit back one day and go, that was a fairly insane, probably 10 weeks of our lives. I mean, even the steep learning curve on e-commerce in that space was just unbelievable. It truly was.
Out of interest, who'd you move your service to? Was it AWS, Amazon Web Services?
No. So we kept our server with SiteGround. We just moved it from a Singapore cloud to a dedicated server in Sydney.
Great, made all the difference.
Yeah, and it basically went from there, and it was as I said, it was a fairly wild ride. So,
well, the business started in 1982, so over 38 years. Do you have any key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business?
Well, I mean, look, it's the present owners got it in '98. From what I can see in the mid '90s, it was in a fair bit of trouble, which is probably around it was probably struggled the last time we had a recession.
Mm-hmm.
The guys who owned it at that stage were heavily into the yachting and boating industry, so it looks to me like there were some things done there that didn't really go that well. The main reason that the owners got involved at that stage with the current owners was they had a keen interest in FishPac. There was obviously technology there that didn't exist, but there was a good idea there. So they got involved and really went hard with that. I mean, these days now, our growth is fairly stable. I mean, what's interesting is, having gone through a recession, I hand on heart, without what we've done with face masks, we'd still be okay, but we're in a pretty strong position at the moment.
Yeah.
The FishPac business has had to rejig itself, because one of the things you'd never forecast, even when you do a SWOT analysis, is there won't be any planes in the sky. But hey, there's no planes in the sky, so the air transport industry has got all sorts of problems. So we've really redeveloped that product into a fully fledged road transport and rail transport system, because it is multimodal, so we can do those sorts of things. But I mean, the business from a numbers perspective, it went through a big shift in 2016. So we were running all our manufacturing out of here in Melbourne, from a factory here in Springvale. We had one of those sort of Murphy's Law moments where 3 of our main machines, within 72 hours of each other, all of a sudden started showing very serious signs of distress.
Yep.
And even the guys who repair them, which are just consultants who came to us and said, these things are just getting too old. It's just, when you see machines like this start to play up and there's no rhyme or reason for it, they're just too old. And so myself and the current owner group looked at it and said, well, wow, all of a sudden we need to go and drop $1 million into buying new equipment. Do we really want to do that? And the answer in any capital expenditure is, well, no, probably not. I mean, if you have to spend it, you have to spend it. But is there a different way of looking at it? And so what we did was, rather than do what most manufacturers do, which was just to go offshore, with a company who we did a lot of work with in Queensland, who we'd always been sort of friendly competitors, and they were saying to me, we'd like to become more of a manufacturer, and we were saying to them, we'd like to become more of a marketer, because that's what, I mean, marketing in the day is my background.
Yep.
And I mean, we knew how to manufacture, but so it sort of was just one of those nice things where we're able to go to each other and strike an agreement. We have never really stepped on each other's toes, and so we're now in very, very tight business together. And so that's really helped the business then be able to focus, because what became apparent to me once we'd finished it was I was spending so much time, and we had like 50 or 60 staff at that stage in the factory. The amount of time that was being taken in people management and orders management and stuff like that. When we stopped it, it was a real sort of light bulb moment, because it became apparent as to the way we could move forward was to do what we knew how to do really well. We knew how to manufacture, but what became apparent was we really knew how to market, and that's been able to give us some really strong growth, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years.
So is that a JV or a merger?
JV.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right. That's very smart. Focus on what you're great at.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, a little bit of humility from anyone who's in business is always a strong point. I mean, there's a lot of people out there with a lot of egos, and none of us wanted to sort of contribute to the bucket of egos that are out there. I've always believed in a bit of humility and understanding where your strengths and weaknesses are. And we weren't saying that manufacturing was a weakness, but what had become a weakness was the fact we had to go and spend $1 million on CapEx.
Yep.
And we didn't want to spend it. So we just had to think outside the box. And as I said, a lot of people just expected us that we just do what every other Australian manufacturer does and go offshore.
Yeah.
But we decided not to do that because Australian made has always been a personal passion of mine.
Yep.
But we didn't want to lose. It wasn't a sense of losing control, but when you go overseas, you just lose that much control and you lose all your IP. And so we were able to retain all our IP. The agreement side of things took a while to get done because everyone had to be comfortable with that. We got to a point where everyone was comfortable, and touch wood, there's been some issues we've had to face over the time, but everyone's been prepared to face that in a mature and sensible way. And that's meant that so far it's gone really, really well, and it shows really no signs of sort of stopping. So
right. And what about like a key number for the growth? So the FTE, when the business started in 1982 to what it is now?
Oh, I wouldn't know what its full-time earnings were in 1982. I mean, I could have a guess. I reckon in the first, I'd be surprised in the first 5 or 6 years if the company turned over more than maybe $50,000 or $60,000 a year. I mean, the business designed something from the ground up that had never been done before. I made mention of the fact that this type of welding called high-frequency welding, it's become apparent that the then owners of it were a real sort of pioneer in that space. It existed overseas, but it had never been perfected. And so this electrode fusion way of welding, evidently the owners at that stage became heavily involved in that side of the machinery and were able to do that.
Yep.
So, I mean, FloatPac's business is sometimes it's a little bit too sort of market centric in that some of the spaces we deal with. I mean, if the seafood industry is having a bad year, we have a bad year. If it's having a good, we sort of ride the wave of that. So being able to diversify into mass and all that sort of stuff is of key importance. But I mean, where it was then to where it is now, I mean, we see. I don't really pay much attention to revenue growth because revenue growth means nothing if you're not making any money.
Yeah.
So I've always been more focused on profitability and really expenditure percentages against revenue.
Yep.
And so our profitability remains strong. We're seeing we see profit growth every year of 5 to 6 to 7 to 10% growth year on year.
It's great.
And we work very hard on getting our expenses down. So. Actually, I've only been reviewing last year's. If we hadn't have seen what happened with coronavirus this year, we're actually on track to cut our expenditure as part of our percentage of expenditure against revenue was actually going to get cut by 50%.
Jeez.
Just through simply being a little bit more frugal, and not spending money where we just deemed we didn't need to spend it. So, it's quite important to get that foundation right, I think, I mean, obviously, with what's going on with coronavirus, it's always going to throw up some fairly significant issues for any type of business, which obviously there's been a lot of business people in this country who have seen something happen here that none of us have experienced now for, well, how long since the last recession, 30 years or something like that. So it's certainly been a steep learning curve, but I do think that hopefully we come out the other end with more knowledge. I think a lot of other people will as well, and probably a little bit more flexibility and versatility in what we want to do and how we do it rather than trying to be too regimented.
Yeah. So if it was only doing, say, 50 grand a year in the early 80s, it would have been 1, maybe 2 FTE. What kind of full-time equivalents would you have now across the group?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, 1 or 2 FTE at that time. I mean, year on year. I mean, if you just did a single number without divulging revenue numbers at the moment, if you just did a single number against 82 now, you'd be in the gross percentages in the 25 or 30,000%.
Yeah. But I meant number of team members, effectively full-time equivalent team.
Oh, okay, yeah. So with regards to full-time employees now, we're at I think 12.
Yeah,
12 or 13.
Yep.
So as I said, that peaked in 2016 at it would have been 65, something like that.
And then you had to pivot when you decided manufacturing is not your strength.
Yeah.
Yep. Great.
Yeah. So we pivoted at that point. Something I'm really quite proud of is we actually helped everybody who was working for us to go and get other jobs. So we made it a very long-term plan. It takes a long time to plan these things, but obviously when machines break down and start dying, you've got yourself a problem you need to sort out straight away.
Mm-hmm.
So we made sure that we helped everybody as much as we possibly could. It wasn't just sort of a here's your retrenchment payment, see you later style type of thing.
Yep.
And so I've always been quite proud about how we handled that, because it's obviously a tough situation, but you've got to sit down and have mature conversations about things that might make people uncomfortable. But life happens, and as this year proves, shit happens. So you've got to be prepared to deal with it. So we worked very hard to make sure that was done properly. And then we probably, in hindsight, we probably cut back a little bit too hard on the management side at that stage. We went back to about 4 or 5, and then just through additional growth, we've then gone out to back being 11 or 12 at the moment.
Yeah, that's great. And when was the moment you felt like you'd succeeded?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I don't really feel like we've succeeded, to be honest with you. Success is a double-edged sword, in my opinion. It's sort of the same thing as perfection. I don't think anyone can ever be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's absolute successes that go on in business. I mean, you plan something and it works, that's a success. But I think if you sort of sit back and rest on your laurels and say, well, it's successful, then I don't know. I mean, when you see what's happened this year, I mean, we would have been looking in January and saying this is shaping up as our most successful year, and then revenue streams that have existed for 20 years in FishPac collapsed in 24 hours. So it's sort of I actually think it's a mark of success at the moment that we've actually that, not to say we're still here because it never got that bad, but that we're back operating fully fledged, I think is probably a really good mark of success in our business at the moment, with what we've all been through, particularly around Australia, but then obviously being in Victoria and being locked down as well, being able to find a way to navigate through that and have to deal through even things like staff permits to come to work. I mean, trying to figure out where we fit into that space with plastics and face masks and all that sort of stuff alone was it's fraught with danger getting things wrong in that space. So that's probably a mark of success at the moment is where we find ourselves at this point in time this year, and where I can see that there looks like there could be some serious success with regards to new business and the way FishPac's not pivoting, but the way FishPac's expanding its market offering and things like that is a good mark of success as well.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Roll with the punches. I mean, what we've done with what we did with Mars and that, I mean, as I said, obviously there was the first sort of real exposure we had into the media space. Rolling with the punches in that and getting involved with media and understanding how that's worked has been a really key feature of what we've been able to do. Mm-hmm. Don't discount your emailing lists at all. Try and get as many people signed up to your email lists, even if you don't communicate with them very often. I mean, there would be people who got an email from FloatPac in April about our face masks who probably haven't heard from us for 2 years.
Yeah.
But I mean, the rate of people unsubscribing has always been very, very low. Those people saw what we were doing, understood what we were doing. The communication on that was very honest, and that was something that we made the decision to sort of say, if someone turns around and says, well, why are you making face masks? Be honest. I mean, we've had a serious problem this year. We're looking at how we can keep our staff and how we can keep our business and all those sorts of things. So, email marketing is one of those things that always still astounds me. I don't know why, but I've always read a lot about the potential success in email marketing. And absolutely, I 100% agree that it's still probably, we still probably pound for pound get more ROI out of that in what we spend with active campaign or whatever we do in that area than
absolutely
any other type of marketing we do.
Absolutely, Gavin. I was just reading this the other day. The Direct Marketing Association put some stats out. For every $1 you put into email marketing, you get $44 back. The next closest to that is SEO. exactly half. So $22 for every $1 spend, and social ads and internet ads, etc., is about $20 for every $1 spend. So people think email's old school, it's dying, but it's still double any of the other categories when it comes to marketing online.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely agree.
And how is the business funded? To take on investors over time or bank finance? I assume there'd be some grants in there with R&D and things.
So yeah, it has had success with R&D refunds over the years. I fell in love and fell out of love and fell back in love with R&D grants once I understood initially what that meant around franking credits for shareholders.
Yep.
Once you don't have franking credits left, then there's no great drama anymore. So we've sorted that issue out. So it's had R&D refunds, and then realistically from there, it's been self-financed through its shareholders and directors. It's never had it's never had sort of big bank loans or anything like that. It was, I mean, what it achieved quickly with FishPac absolutely gave it a very strong base in that the client base in Australia was a little bit more advanced in how they were transporting fish than what we've seen overseas. So we were able to come in and switch one part of technology out and replace it with our oxygen transport system, which our current major shareholder, who was then the managing director, basically did by himself. And then from there, it's basically been, I mean, we've always run a very, very strict line of credit. Even now with some of our big clients, I don't, I was taught very early on not to operate on other people's money.
Yep.
And an old boss of mine at that stage used to just say, we don't OPM, which was other people's money. And so I've always carried that through. We don't offer OPM. I've said to some clients who get upset with me, we're not a bank. If you want to go and talk to the bank, I'll give you the phone number of my bank manager. But we're not a bank. I don't have that facility to be able to offer it to you. And so big projects and things that we do in the commercial space, we still take deposits with clients who are excellent payers. But I mean, at the end of the day, some of the stuff we do is very bespoke, and there are certain materials and things that we have to import from Europe and North America in particular. And I've got to pay those guys up front. And I can't allow us to take that credit risk on that. So it's always been a very strong point with us that we've been direct with that. And so a lot of that funding has come from that. And that really allows us also to then develop strong relationships, because we've gone to those people and said, well, look, we need you to finance it, but this is not sort of a wham bam seeky mams thing. Like we're in this for the long haul, and it's been a really nice avenue to be able to develop strong relationships. I think a lot of people in that funding space, in that sort of payment space, get a little bit scared off about being upfront about saying, guys, we're not here to fund your business, we're here to fund ours. So if we want to do business together, then that's great, and we appreciate you as a customer, but there's still a client-supplier relationship there that needs to be respected. And as much as I absolutely agree the client's always right, I think it's beneficial to customers if they understand that treating your supplier well actually allows you to run your business much better as well. So as someone who supplies and as someone who buys, we run that the same way across both of those avenues.
Have you looked at the federal government export finance loan?
Yes. So EFIC, I think it's been renamed now, but EFIC is one of those things that we are looking at the moment. It's a bit of a strange beast as to how they run it. When I say that, it's more so just a situation that I probably need to sit down and get my head around a little bit more. I mean, a lot of the grants these days have these, how would you say it? From a sort of a purely accounting perspective, the way that they get run is a little bit obscure. That's not a criticism; it's just a different way of doing things. So, we are looking at EFIC at the moment for a couple of projects, and if it fits the bill, then absolutely we'll be going further down that route with those guys as well.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Yes. Yes, I would. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I actually think about that often. I mean, it's obviously, we cover a few different industries at the moment. So whether or not FloatPac would look exactly the same as the way it does now, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to sit down and have a look at it, but there's not really an area of the business with us that isn't successful. I mean, it's funny I use that word successful. What I mean by that is that you may have one part of our business that is struggling, but there's another part of the business through our diversification that can sort of cover the runs for that while it stops struggling and picks back up.
Yeah.
So yes, I would. Yeah, if I had the funding, I'd be in the same thing, and I'd probably be going 50 times harder.
Great. And can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Cash flow is always my stressful point. So it's probably just because I come from a long family of warriors.
Yep.
I've just always been a natural warrior. I remember my grandmother always telling my grandfather to stop worrying, and he'd just say to her, "I can't." It's the same with me. It's not an anxiety thing. It's just a worry thing. So cash flow is always the thing that I always I don't like owing people money. I'd rather pay people money up front, which we try and do as much as we possibly can. But cash flow is absolutely the number one stress point.
I'm just trying to find. Yeah, on worry, I love that Mark Twain quote. I have had lots of trouble in my life, most of which never happened.
Yep, exactly right.
Keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, it does keep you on your toes, and I think it also it's the same thing as perfection to me, or success, or resting on your laurels. I think if you're not just that little bit edgy, things can pass you, and it can actually then become problematic. If you're edgy and you're just trying to look at what's going on and understanding where the market is and doing what you need to do, having that little bit of edginess and a little bit of worry, I always think about it within myself as part of my strength. It's definitely part of my weakness because I probably worry too much. But at the same time, it's a strength because it forces me to keep looking and for us to keep looking at what we're doing next.
Yep. And what area in business do you fear you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Probably people management. When we were employing a lot of people, I figured out there's a very good reason why I'm not in human resources, and I think that's because people either it's a natural subconscious thing that I've learned is that there are people who do their job and they come to their job and they do their job and they do it extremely well and they go home and they switch off.
Yep.
And then there's people who are invested in their job. I'm naturally invested in my job, but even when I was just working as a sales guy for a healthcare company in Sydney, back when I lived there in the late 1990s, I was always invested in it. And so because I have that personality trait and probably a little bit of OCD in that space as well, struggling to deal with people who are not invested in it, who are not actually doing anything wrong. They're not doing anything wrong. And if anything, I'm actually probably a little bit envious that they can just turn off.
Aren't they called employees, not business owners?
Yeah, they are. What I realised when I was just an employee though was that I always had that sort of, I always had that sort of invested interest. Like, I remember I mentioned the healthcare company. I went and took a job just because I was looking for a job in a company that sold dental consumable equipment like gauze and gloves and all that sort of stuff. And I'd take boxes of gloves home with me on the weekend just to read. That there were instruction manuals in them and all that sort of stuff. I just wanted to learn because I've always been someone who is more comfortable talking about sales in an area that I'm knowledgeable in. Basically, I can talk the leg off a chair, but I'm not a great bullshit artist, so I need to be informed.
Yes.
And so you're absolutely right that it is just being an employee, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, and it's not a criticism at all. But I found myself just struggling with it, where if there was something to be done, we'd just go and do it. But then there'd be people who would just put their stuff down at 5 o'clock and go, and you'd be like, "But guys, there's so much work to do." Yeah. But that's just, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what I realised was that it was a sticking point in my ability to manage.
Yeah.
In that, as I said, it was just one of those things. I went home and said to my wife one day, "There's a very, very clear reason why I'm not a human resources manager, and I understand that. And let's just make sure I don't get involved in that again."
Fair point. And what have you enjoyed least about managing fast growth?
That's another really good question. What have I enjoyed the least about it? It's a hard question to answer because I thrive on a little bit of chaos.
Yeah.
Not in a sort of chaotic, out of control way, but having that sort of. I remember when I first got involved with sales, getting the buzz of the sale. And I say that I love marketing, and I do love marketing, but I actually came into marketing backwards because the first thing I ever did was go and sell. And so selling was was a buzz that I started to enjoy, and realised that it was just a bit of a brain kick, I guess. Go out and get a sale, and you work hard to get it, and you go from there. So, yeah, it's a really good question. I'm not sure exactly the best way to answer it, to be honest with you.
That's all right. What do you love most about growing a small business?
Employing people is a really great thing that I do thoroughly enjoy. We've had some people with us now, and also having people who I've grown to trust and be. I mean, you spend more time at work than you do at home most of your adult life. So, working with people who you get along with, who you can trust implicitly, who you know are doing a good job, that's been really good. We got a real kick out of being able to employ a lot of people this year in a very short period of time, where there are a lot of people who didn't have a job, and we've absolutely know our very unique position where we have been very fortunate to all of us to keep our jobs and keep our business going. But being able to go and employ people and just be able to say to someone, look, come in tomorrow, go through the process of here's your forms for your tax file number, and tell us your superannuation, lots of stuff, and just know that that person is able to walk out of our place and know they're coming back tomorrow is just one of those things that I've always enjoyed. And I don't think it'll ever go anywhere, because it's just one of those, one of those pleasant things you get of being able to employ people. And I realise it's a privilege that not everybody gets to experience.
Yeah, I agree. What's been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey? Getting rid of a little bit of imposter syndrome, I think, has been a big thing for me. I mean, like any business CEO or owner or leader or whatever, I think we all suffer from that. I don't know everything. I don't pretend to know everything. I'm still, particularly in the solar renewable space, I'm learning more every day than what I've learnt probably in the last 10 years, which is actually really enjoyable, being able to get in there and talk to some extremely smart people. I mean, some of the people who work in the renewable space in this country are a testament to how well and why the renewables industry in Australia has gone as well as it has in light of governments who haven't supported it properly, and whatever the reasons as to why that's happened. But but getting rid of that little bit of imposter syndrome, whilst also knowing a little bit about where my place is, has been important. Absolutely. And what's the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
I've actually taken to spending an hour a day trying to keep my eye on the financial world. So, like simple things like get a subscription to the Australian Fin Review. And go and read their blogs, and try and spend 20 minutes a day, not much time, but try and spend 20 minutes a day looking at what the editors are talking about and understand that. So that when all of a sudden, for the first time in 30 years, people are like, the wolves are at the door and the recession's hit and we're all going to lose our jobs and all our businesses are going to close and all sorts of stuff. The Fin Review and a few other business websites really obviously hammered that home, because it still is a serious problem. When I see the RBA now saying that we look like we're technically out of recession. But reading into the people who weren't stressed and worried and sort of jumping at ghosts and actually saying, well, okay, this has happened and what happens next, has actually been something really enjoyable. And it's become part of my habit every day now, where I usually get to work half an hour before everybody else, just sit down and flick through emails, all sorts of stuff. And now all of a sudden I'm on the Fin Review website it might be 20 minutes some days, it might be 10 minutes some days, half an hour other days, but just going through it and reading and just getting a bit of a sense of what the obviously multinational community in particular is talking about. But there is really good aspects of that are applicable to small to medium enterprises. And getting my head around that and just being that is a really nice habit that I actually value quite highly now. It's become a subconscious thing, but when I sit back and think about things at the end of the day or on a weekend or something like that, I often think about something I read on Monday in the Fin Review or the business section of the Australian, or a blog that I follow or something like that. So it's a nice habit that I hope continues.
Do you love talking small business growth with other owners? We have a vibrant online community from many industries around the world. Plus, we regularly add new tools and resources for community members and host 2 webinars a month to help you grow your small business. growsmallbusiness.com. Good. And can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Wins have been trusting gut instinct. So when you go and employ people, and I'm more talking about at a management level. Obviously, I've experienced between hiring managers and hiring factory staff and warehouse staff and things like that. But at a management level, I've seen people come in who are absolutely, on paper, the best applicant for the role.
Yep.
But in the interview, something that maybe one of the less better applicants on paper has said, has twigged, and there's a gut feeling there that that's going to work. And so when I think about the people who work for us now, who we've had as long-time people, some of those guys were absolutely the best applicants. Some of them, without naming names, weren't the best applicant on paper, but when we met them, they were the best applicant. And so the training way of hiring people that I was taught doesn't necessarily mean that you go on gut feeling.
Yep.
But running that and being positive and almost having a bit of confidence to back yourself in to say, no, I'm prepared to do this, is a really important part of what I found in hiring.
Yeah.
Some of the mistakes has probably been not realising that there's a few people out there who I've hired over the time who have probably pumped up their own tyres a little bit too much.
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
And it is a tricky one, because you go and do reference checks and everything's fine, and you go and do this and you go and do that, and then 3 or 4 months down the track you ask them to do something, and it's something basic that they can't do that they should be able to do if their experience is right or something like that. So it's not really something that I think you can necessarily be prepared for, because if someone is on paper and they are absolutely the right candidate, then sometimes time is the only thing that's going to be able to give you that insight.
Yeah, there's 2 things I'd say to that. I totally agree. You've got to be brutal with your, in Australia, it's a 6-month probation period. You can legally get rid of someone without it being a real pain in the ass legally. They don't really have any recourse. So you've got to be really brutal at that, not just at the 6-month mark, but assessing them every week or every month and collecting your evidence and making an informed opinion on whether they are, 1, the right cultural fit, and 2, they're skilled enough to do the job that you hired them for. So you've got to be really brutal before you get past that probation period, but even beforehand. But the other thing I've heard, we spoke recently on a cast here, that a few people in the interview process, they will give a project to candidates, and that whittles out a lot of people. 1, people don't hit the project deadline. So one of the people I spoke with on the cast, they actually pay the candidates for their time to do this project. It may not actually be a commercial project that the company will use, but it's a good test that, like 50% of the people will never hand the project in. 20% will miss the deadline, and there you've got rid of 70% of your candidates. And then that last 30%, I hadn't even thought about this, but I think it was Devin mentioned the other day, what the other 30% then allows you to do. You've got their projects, you can look at it, you can look at their style, but there's another benefit in that you've given them a task, something that is going to be in their core of their job. And if they hand something in lackluster, or they even realize themselves, actually, this is not the kind of work I want to be doing, they can put their hand up and say, actually, I'm pulling out. So yeah, I've heard that can also help whittle out, give you a better chance of getting an A player on the bus.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I could absolutely see how that would be beneficial.
What are some things you'd recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Find something that you can do almost every day with your staff.
Yep.
What I mean by that is, in a small to medium enterprise, I don't have a lot of money to go out and do huge Christmas parties and hand out massive bonuses and all that sort of stuff. What I do is come downstairs once everyone's at work. I've got a couple of people work upstairs with me. Go downstairs and ask everybody the same question every day. Would you like a coffee?
Yep.
And I go around to the cafe around the corner and I buy everybody a coffee. And it's something that costs me $15 to $20 a day. Mm-hmm. But it's a habitual thing. And I've found that, everybody, not everybody expects it. Like today, I haven't had time to go and do it, so we haven't done it today. Yep. But it's one of those things. It's one of those little things. It's something that's a subconscious thing. I started doing it just because I was going to go and buy a coffee. I thought, hey guys, I'll just buy you a coffee. Yep. But at the end of the day, it's a habitual thing that I do think the staff appreciate, and so that's absolutely a very important part of growth, because there's only so much that any of us can do, and if we can get people to buy, if you can get whoever's working for you and whoever's with you to buy into what you're trying to achieve, and make sure they understand what you're trying to do. And whatever way you can show them that you appreciate them, which in my instance is buy them a coffee or an iced coffee, or someone asks for a Diet Coke, whatever it is.
Yep.
It's just those little things that I think we know that people have to work for money. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people don't just work for the financial aspect.
It's often Gavin, it's often number 5 on a lot of HR studies.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep.
People have to get paid, obviously, but are they in alignment with the company's mission and values? Are they respected in the workplace? Are they supported their development, their career path? Do they feel trusted? And that they're all much more important than the actual pay.
Exactly. Yeah. And so as I said, I mean, it would be wonderful if we could all treat employees the way that Google does and all that sort of stuff. But in the real world, that can't happen. But that little habitual thing I've found to be highly beneficial. Yeah. It's something that I just started doing. Some people say no. Some people say yes. I make sure everybody gets asked. Everybody gets treated the same way. And it's a really neat thing. And it's absolutely probably the smallest thing I can do. But at the same time, it's the thing that I do, and I know that my guys and girls who work for us appreciate it, and it's just that nice thing that it gives us that opportunity to have that. I don't know. Back in the days when everyone used to stand around the water cooler, we stand around and have our coffee together for 5 minutes. And how's your family? And have you done this? And have you done that? And have you spoken to Simon about this or whatever? It's that thing that just it gives us that ability to sort of open that door where even if and the other thing is a couple of times we've noticed, particularly when lockdowns are very bad here and that, we had a couple of people who were struggling. Yep. It gave that opportunity for me to say, look, are you okay? Can we help you in any way? And I just don't think that would be there if we weren't doing that sort of thing. So it is important to me, and it's important to me personally that I have that connection with everybody as well. But it's been highly beneficial, and you are right. We all know the reasons why people work, and there's plenty of studies out there and all sorts of stuff, and being able to do that is something I get enjoyment out of, and I know the guys who work for me enjoy it as well.
Yeah. Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Oh, I don't handle balance very well, to be honest with you.
You love what you do too much. That old saying, choose a job you love and you never work a day in your life.
Yeah, look, there's that's right. I do. It's one of those funny things. The screen time updates on your iPhone has actually been something that has been really good for me, because I'd be looking at my phone all day and all night. Like, I have people I need to talk to. We have suppliers overseas. There's plenty of legitimate reasons, but then there's also illegitimate reasons as to why I'm looking. And being able to switch off is something that I've always struggled with. It comes back to that worry thing I've talked about before, about not being able to get that brain off. But at the same time, it's also then can be detrimental to particularly your mental health. So I try now to not do anything on weekends if I can. I mean, I have a young family with 2 beautiful daughters as well. So that family time has become far more important to me. Yep. And so, that balance thing now is probably a little bit easier to get my head around. Yep. But I mean, pre-kids, it'd just be, it was certainly a lot of work. And that's meant that not just myself, but the business has had good success. But at the same time, there's more important things at work or business at the end of the day. So, balance is one of those things that I still struggle with, to be very frank.
Yeah, it is a tough one. How much professional development have you invested in yourself over the years?
So I came out of university. I was originally going to be a teacher. I left high school and didn't really know what I wanted to do, and thought, well, having a teaching degree is at least something to fall back on and would be nice. So that all went really well until I got to my 3rd year of my teaching degree and had to go and have a placement in a high school. Yep. Went to that placement, got about 3 days in, and said, I can't live my life in a regimented scenario like this. I love going to school. I did okay at school. I don't want to go back to it. So I finished a Bachelor of Arts in graphic design and photography, but had always sort of looked at business and stuff like that. I mentioned I went into some sales roles, got thrown in the deep end on sales, realised that marketing was driving sales and not the other way around. Yep. And then professional development-wise, went and did a postgrad in international marketing. Mm-hmm. And it was I did that as an online course in, must have been 2006 or 2007, and decided to do it full time. So I was working during the day and studying during the night, and knocked it off in about 18 months rather than 3 years. So I did that, and then did that, and then I've done a couple other things. You mentioned Kate Turner at the start. I've done her SEO course. I invest in being part of her digital MasterChef group. I get really good benefit out of that. And then at the moment, I'm looking at possibly doing an MBA. I'm still grappling as to why I'm doing it. So until I can sort of answer that question in my own head, I'm not going to go ahead and do it. Yep. But I do have a yearning to want to keep learning, and I think that particularly, I mean, say age, it sounds silly. I'm 41 years old in January.
Yep.
It's been a while. Apart from Kate's course, it's been a little while since I've gone and done anything for my own sort of learning development. Obviously, I do a lot of reading. I talk to a lot of the business owners, and I learn a lot that way. And dealing with some big multinational companies gives me the opportunity just to learn by looking at their corporate structures and how they handle things and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about that. Still doing a lot of learning in renewables and lots of stuff. So I don't think it's ever a case of not learning. But I do feel the need to probably in the next couple of years look at doing some more personal development on an actual official level rather than just the unofficial stuff that I think we all do every day.
What about mentors or coaches along the way?
I haven't really had mentors or coaches as such. I do have family members who I lean on quite heavily, and that's just more of a personal relationship thing as much as it is a business thing.
Yep.
They're always outside of immediate. I mean, my wife and I talk about business all the time, but outside of that immediate thing, having people who have known me for a long time who can just say to me, "No, you're being an idiot," or "That's the wrong thing to do," and just to bounce ideas off has been really important. I did go through, actually, when you mentioned personal development, I did go through some coaching, probably 2014, 2015, looking at sort of NLP communications and things like that.
Yep. I've been part of a workshop that's done a bit of that before. Yeah, found it was quite powerful.
Yeah. So it was quite powerful, and I sort of ended up developing a relationship with my coach at that stage, where it sort of more went into a little bit of business coaching as well. That went really well there for quite some time. And then there's people who I'll pick up the phone and ring on a daily or bi-daily basis who I think probably if I actually said to them, "Do you think you're a mentor of mine?" some of them would feel a little bit uncomfortable by saying that, but it is sort of a circle of people that I do talk to on and off, as I said, daily, bi-daily, maybe weekly, that I can bounce ideas off, and they give me different aspects to what I should be doing, or should we be looking at this and lots of the stuff. And really, with what we've been through with face masks, there have been a couple of people who I've lent on quite closely in that they have a lot more experience in e-commerce than what I did.
Yep.
And so communicating with clients, sorts of stuff became really important and that sort of thing. And so learning in that space as well. So, I think it's more, there's people who I now call friends who I've met through business.
Yep.
And those friends, I think because our relationship started as a business relationship, I was either buying something from them or selling something to them. I think when something starts in that space, it never necessarily leaves that sort of embryonic stage of where it started from. I think that's always there. So I've got people who I know I can pick up and talk to about things in business straight away, and we might talk for 5 minutes, we might talk for an hour, whatever it is. There's probably 4 or 5 of those people who I've got in my life, thankfully, at the moment.
Yep. What about, do you have a board of directors or advisors at the moment?
Yes, we do. Yes, so we have a board of directors for FloatPac, and there will be a board of directors for Floating Solar once we finish doing that establishment as well.
Yeah, right. Okay. And how often do they meet, and how big is the board?
The board is four directors and another. The board of directors is 3 directors actually. So it's 3 directors and 2 other shareholders. They meet a little bit incoherently, to be honest with you. I mean, there's communication that we all have with each other almost every day. So a lot of that stuff, there's reports that we run and everybody sees those and those sorts of things. The last full-on meeting we had was February in Melbourne. So 2 of them are based in Melbourne, one's based in Sydney. So obviously once we've gone into lockdown and border closures and stuff, it's been difficult to meet face-to-face. And we've had some Zoom meetings and things like that. But, I mean, meeting-wise, actual physical meetings are probably 3 or 4 times a year, which is not unusual, I think, for an SME-sized business of our size.
Yep.
And then, I mean, look, I'm quite lucky with all the directors. And if there's something I need to talk to them about, send them an email and say, hey, you got an hour for me this afternoon, or can I ring you now, or just pick up the phone and ring them. And it's fairly fluid and open and honest that way, rather than it being quite regimented like what happens when you get into a larger business or a multinational.
Yeah. And do you report into the board? I assume you don't sit on the board yourself?
No, so I don't sit on the board. Yeah. I report to the board. And yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that we were running probably a few too many P&Ls and things. And I sort of said to them, guys, if you look at these ones I'm running for you, I don't think I need to run them that often.
Yep.
I mean, the profitability is there. The main thing I spend my time on is cash flow. So yes, I report to the board, particularly the majority shareholder. I talk to him quite often. And yeah, sort of as I say, it's a little bit fluid, but in the way that FloatPac's business is quite niche, the way we run that management side as well, I guess you'd say, would be quite niche as well. It wouldn't fly in a lot of other businesses, but in FloatPac's business, it actually works exceptionally well.
All right, Gavin, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business? Intestinal
fortitude. Being strong and having conviction in that what you're doing will be successful.
Yep.
And
no one said that before. Yeah.
Yeah. And being prepared to back yourself is probably the toughest thing.
Yep. And favorite business book which has helped you the most?
Look, to be quite frank, I can't remember the name of the 2 main marketing books I had in my postgrad degree.
Mm-hmm.
They're sitting on my bookshelf back at the office. It's actually a little embarrassing. I can't remember their names. I can email it to you later so you can put it in the notes. But those 2 books I still read quite often. I call on those.
Yep, great. Email them through and Peter will add them. Link
add them into the notes. I actually get a real kick out of reading biographies of big business guys.
Yep.
So like Richard Branson's book, Bill Gates' book, the first Elon Musk book that came out about his backstory and history and all that sort of stuff. I find reading those fascinating because what it shows is that 9 times out of 10, unless a lot of those guys weren't born with, it's a very Australian colloquialism, but they weren't born with silver spoons in their mouths. They figured out how to make money and were exceptionally successful within their own selves. And just reading and understanding their backgrounds, I've always found very fascinating. So I've never lent particularly hard on reading a lot of business books in inverted commas.
Yep.
But reading those biographies and things I always get a kick out of. And it also gives me the ability to sort of, when I say being a worrier and stuff, it gives me the ability to sort of tune out a little bit and being able to focus on that and just wander off a little bit so that I can it gives me the ability to go away and relax a little bit so I can then refocus on what I need to do.
And any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
So there are some podcasts. I mean, we've mentioned Kate. Kate's SEO podcast is really a really enjoyable podcast. So I get a real kick out of listening to that, and I still learn a lot from the different people she has on there. There's another one which I've been on called The Industrial Marketer, which is run by a lady called MJ Peters out of California that I've listened to and still listen to all of her marketing prowess and that sort of stuff. And then podcasts to me are a bit of a form of escape. Most of the podcasts I listen to back in my university days, where I had great hopes of being in a band and having a very big love of music, I generally go and listen to music podcasts where you've got guys who are in bands or jazz players or whatever, just off talking about their lives and different stories and stuff. It's sort of a bit of a form of escapism for me.
Yep. One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
Active Campaign.
Yeah, I've heard great things about that. I'm yet to test it out. And it's Australian, isn't it? Australian?
I'm not sure if Active Campaign's Australian.
I think it is. I think the founder was speaking recently at a tech conference here.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he's an Aussie.
Well, if he is, it's fantastic. I mean, we were running a CRM and we were running MailChimp.
Yeah.
MailChimp to me became a little bit too limited. I wasn't happy with a few things they were doing around costings. And so I started looking around and a few people had mentioned ActiveCampaign. Funnily enough, it was actually more expensive than MailChimp, but we were getting a CRM that integrated with our a full CRM program that integrated with our email program as well, which gives me a lot more ability to see what's going on with clients and who's reading what, and when we're integrating, when we're interconnecting with each other, and track histories and pipelines all in the one area rather than have to have 2 or 3 different apps to run the same thing.
Yeah, sometimes it's best not to go so cheap, particularly on your software, and invest a little bit more. And, because cheap can be expensive. You try to cut corners, save $50 a month, and it'll cost you more time and lost opportunities.
Exactly. That's right.
Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Build your website and spend the first 8 weeks of your life starting out refining that to the point where you can almost not touch it for the next 6 months.
It's great advice, especially in this day and age. Online marketing is so
absolutely. It still astounds me the number of businesses I see that don't have an online presence.
Yeah,
I just don't comprehend it now, and particularly now. I mean, businesses that have succeeded around the world in the last 6 months. I mean, a massive part of that has been online sales. I mean, you only need to go and look at the stock exchange to look at what the value of Myers and David Jones is now versus the value of JB Hi-Fi and Kogan.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's so easy to see that it's just part and parcel of, you start a company in the old days where you go and get your with compliment slips done and your business cards and your pads and pens and all that. You don't need to worry about any of that anymore. Go and spend it and just get your website done. It's sort of not even really the new way now, but as I said, it still astounds me as the number of people who don't have that presence.
Yeah.
And I guess probably adding to that is, don't rely on social media. I think there's a fallacy there that social media can replace websites. I don't disagree that, I mean, we've had great success with social media, but you can also run into problems with social media where you're not master of your own domain.
Yes.
Whereas if you've got your website there, you've got that there no matter what else happens. So if you get ghosted on Instagram or your Facebook account gets shut down or whatever, you've still got your website there and you've still got that's yours and it's nobody else's.
Yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely. And same with the email list. You've still got all those email addresses, whereas Facebook could pull the rug under you any day.
Yep, exactly. That's right.
Thanks for your time today, Gavin. I think the audience get a lot of value out of what you shared with us. Really interesting and exciting journey. 38 years, a lot of pivoting in there, especially with COVID. Congratulations on that success as well. And yeah, thanks very much for your time today, coming on the show, on the cast.
No worries. Much appreciated. I greatly appreciate you having me on your cast.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.